So if you have a seller who has a short appraisal, what do you do about it? This is actually a pretty big problem right now because our market keeps appreciating. And maybe you have run into this problem and maybe you haven't. If you're selling 100 homes a year, you've run into this problem. Here's what's happening, okay, guys? The appraisal may come in low because as the market keeps increasing every month, the 6 month ago price in the neighborhood for a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-story brick, fireplace, swimming pool in the backyard might have been 350,000. So that was 6 months ago. Well, now the market keeps going up, keeps going up. Well, now 5.5 months later, in our market, you have to have a comparable home sale that's within 6 months. And it has to be within a certain radius, certain school district, all that kind of thing. So let's just say 5.5 months later, we have a home that's now sold pending for 375. Well, if an appraiser goes and looks for comparable home sales, they're going to see this sale at 350 and say, well, that's what this property is worth. They don't adjust it for time, knowing that the market is increasing. They have to find something to justify to the bank, right? So I've got some strategy here for you guys. I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do. If a house that you've listed and sold pending is now appraising low, here's what I would do. Okay, so write these down so you know when you do get into this situation, you can actually do this. Okay, this is something. It's those of you watching the call later, you can actually hit the pause button. I just actually had a really cool meeting with an appraiser and about 5 other people doing a mastermind session last week. And I asked the appraiser, what's the most effective ways to get an appraisal changed? And this is what they said. So the first thing you want to do is check for off-market or non-MLS sales on your local auditor's website. So we have a public auditor's page, and we can actually go and search by streets. And then the way that our system works is you can actually put in a time period. So instead of just searching the MLS for recent sales, you go to the auditor records. Why would you do that? Well, there's several types of buyers right now that are buying properties off market, which means they were never listed on the multiple listing service. So that could be new construction. So if someone bought a home and they went directly to the builder, it was never listed on the multiple listing service, that will not show up. So if that house sold for 400 and it's a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath brick, fireplace and no swimming pool or whatever, but let's say it went for 400. Now you have a comparable home sale that your appraiser did not look at. They only, 99% of the time that I know of, they only go for the MLS sales because they're easy to find and they don't have to do a lot of digging. So new construction. The next one is these iBuyers. So that could be Zillow, iBuyHomes.com. It could be a local investor that says I buy houses, whatever. Those people will go directly to a seller and they will offer them money for a house. Now, a lot of times those are going to be a lower sale price, but this is another way to look for a comparable home sale. So you're not going to know necessarily who bought the house unless you see it in the auditor report. The point is that it creates another off-market opportunity for you to support a value. Does that make sense? So what I'm telling you to do is don't just look at the MLS reports, look at the auditor reports. Okay, also sometimes a neighbor or a family friend or someone that's writing letters, hey, I need to buy a house, someone may respond to one of those and they may overpay for a house just for the convenience of it not going on the market. Because a lot of people don't want to compete with multiple offers. So if you're a buyer right now and you write a letter and you say, hey, my name is Derek Ty. My wife and I are looking for a home in Park City, Utah. We want to be close to the bike trail. We saw that, your home in this neighborhood is perfect. If you ever consider selling, please call me. What if that person calls me like, yeah, I don't feel like going through a real estate agent. I don't feel like going through appraisals and inspections and all that stuff. If you'll buy it for $500,000, I'll sell it to you. And I'm like, sure, great. So I buy it. Well, that would have never shown up on the multiple listing service. So hopefully those are the type of sales that you could potentially use then in that neighborhood and say, hey, appraiser, there was one that just sold for 500,000. You didn't even pick up on it. And then if the appraiser sees it, then they will drive by it, and then they could potentially increase the value for your seller. Because ultimately, you do not want you don't want a low appraisal, because your seller obviously hired you to sell it for a certain price. You agreed on a certain price, and now the buyer is trying to get it for less money. So that's something I would definitely work on, guys, to make sure that you can help your people out. Okay, so what's another technique? Well, I would also check the comparable home sales that they use. So if there's 3 comparable home sales and those are the only 3 you can use, I would go through them with a fine-tooth comb. Is everything accurate? If it's saying it's 4 bedrooms, was it really 3? If they're saying 2 baths, was it really 1.5? You're going to basically comb through the comps. Is that home that they're comparing you to, does it have like a power line next to it, or a cell phone tower, or is it on a busy street corner? Does it have a sewer plant, literally right next door? If those things exist, then you could say, hey, that appraisal of that particular property, we need some compensation because ours isn't sitting next to a cell phone tower. Ours is not next to a sewer plant. So you might get a credit for 15,000 or 20,000. That might imagine how much difference that would make to you personally. What if you could help a seller do that? Okay, so that's a huge thing for appraisals, guys. So the next one is next tip is if you've checked the local auditor site, if you've checked the comparable sales and you can't find any way to get any leverage out of that, there are still options to keep a deal alive. So here's the 3 that I usually present to a buyer and seller. If I'm representing the seller, I will say to them, okay, we have a short appraisal. Let's say it's $25,000. I will say to the seller, how would you like to handle this? So I always ask them the question, and they're usually going to say, what are we supposed to do? They're going to come back to me, and I say, well, I would ask the buyer if they can come up with the difference. So let's say they've listed or we've got the house sold contract pending at 375. The appraisal comes in at 350. We would just first of all maybe go back to the buyer and say, hey, we would like you to pay for the difference. This is the price we agreed to. Now in 99% of the real estate contracts that are written, it's going to have an appraisal contingency, and that says they don't have to buy the home if the home appraises short. But what usually happens is the buyer still wants to buy it, but they may not be able to afford coming up with another $25,000 cash, because a lot of times the loan officer approved them for a certain amount. The appraisal comes back in. There's a loan to value ratio. There's a debt to income ratio. They may not be able to afford to do it, and they may not have the extra cash to do it. So in that case, the buyer may go back to the seller and say, we need you to reduce the price by the full 25,000. So we've covered 2 scenarios. 1, the buyer pays the whole amount. 2, the seller pays the whole amount. The third option is there's some kind of compromise in the middle. And usually that's what I see happen a lot of times. So the most recent one I had happen, the appraisal was like 25,000 short, and the buyer wanted the seller to pay for it. And I was representing the buyer in this case. And the seller said, no way, you're paying for it all. And my buyer came back and said, I'll split the difference with you. So they came up to $12,500 in cash they were going to put at the closing table. The seller said, no, we want the whole amount again. And my buyer came back one more time and said, okay, I can come up to 20,000 out of the 25,000 short, but I need some help. I can't afford it. And then the seller agreed to do it. So that's kind of what the back and forth could look like on an appraisal. So after saying all this about an appraisal, here's the last part I'm going to say. So if you want good relationships with appraisers in your market, which I believe you should, what you need to do is a few things and to help with the appraisal. Number 1, you want to call appraisers back when they call you. Usually they're calling to get access into your listing, or you're representing the buyer and you're trying to help to get them access to the listing agent. Just make sure you call them back quickly, because they're trying to cram you in, and just like every other vendor out there right now, they're all backed up. Number 2, what you want to do is you want to give answers back to them after the sale. So if your appraiser or an appraiser in your market says, hey, you sold a home 3 months ago, what was the condition of the basement? Was it really nice? Hey, tell me about that swimming pool. Was it in good condition? Always call the appraisers back. They have a tough job and they can't read through everything and look at every picture and figure out the thing. But I can tell you over the years, I've sold, 1,500 homes. I can tell you I've been contacted by a lot of appraisers asking me for information about homes I've already sold. I can tell you that goes a long way with them. They remember the agents that are cooperative. I heard from this appraiser the other day that like half the agents that he calls never even call him back. They're like, well, I don't need to call that guy back, so I just don't. And that's kind of a problem in our industry right now. We just kind of look at everything. If it doesn't benefit me right this second, I don't do it. So please don't be one of those agents that doesn't call appraisers back. Okay. As a good Kingdom real estate agent, that's a standard that we should be above the world on a little bit as well. All right. And then let me finish up this conversation about appraisals, and I'm going to get to the next question. So the last thing about appraisals is make sure you send your seller a list of do's and don'ts before the appraisal. So if your home looked beautiful, it was all staged and nice and bright and clean, then you get the house under contract for $375. Then the inspection comes along and inspects great. I've seen sellers then start packing and moving out and the house gets trashed. It looks like a bomb went off. So then the appraiser shows up a week and a half before closing and they're trying to match up this $375,000 value with this house that's trashed. Now, we all have to move, we all have to go through packing, we all have to do this, but you have to be conscious of the fact that the house sale isn't done yet. So that might mean packing and putting everything into the garage or putting it into a storage bin or renting a pod, but don't trash the house. Because if the appraiser comes in and sees the house is all trashed and they're like, I don't see the value here, this place is like a dump, they don't see it all staged and nice like the buyer did, you may lose 10, 15, 25, $30,000 worth of an appraisal. Was it worth it to try to, be Mr. Johnny on the spot and get the house packed quicker, or not rent a $1,000 storage pod that shows up in your driveway, you can pack it full? I say not. So definitely don't do that. So that's my tips on appraisals, and hopefully that helped.